tuned into this evening. The Allowed series is made possible through the support of the Library Foundation members. So thank you all, the members that are tuning in this evening. And if you're not a member yet, please join and visit lfla.org/support to join now, or consider giving this as a holiday gift to a family or friend. You won't want to miss our last program of 2020, which will be a Lost and Found program at the movies, a Fellini centenary celebration in 8.5 parts. This evening, we are lucky to have two of the most important forces in American theater in the last 40 years, André Gregory and Wallace Shawn. The two have collaborated for nearly half their lives in the theater and in film. The plays include Our Late Night, The Designated Mourner, Grasses of 1,000 Colors, and A Master Builder, and including such films as the iconic My Dinner with André and Vanya on 42nd Street. Tonight, they're here to discuss André Gregory's new vivid and witty book, This Is Not My Memoir. Gregory's life could be described as a work of art, as he said in an interview. Might this, he asks, be part of the task of being human, to keep working on oneself so your life can be more like a work of art? André Gregory's career in avant-garde theater covers a far-reaching ground. He was one of the original creators of regional theater movement, the off-Broadway movement in New York, and with Wallace Shawn, the American independent film movement. He has directed plays at the Public Theater, the Royal Court Theater, and at unconventional spaces like an abandoned men's club in the Lower East Side of New York, to the Donald Judd Building in the desert in Marfa, Texas. He's also written a play in verse, acted in a dozen films, and most recently turned to the visual arts, with several gallery shows under his belt and others planned for the spring. Wallace Shawn is an actor and playwright. His broad and varied career includes such films as Manhattan, Princess Bride, Mrs. Parker and the Vicious Circle, Toy Story, The Incredibles. The list goes on and on. Included on the list are two original distinctive films of his and Gregory's, directed by Louis Malle, My Dinner with André and Vanya on 42nd Street. His writing focuses on class, politics, and morality, starting with his play Our Late Night, which was awarded an off-Broadway Obie, to Marie and Bruce, where he made his first acting debut, to The Fever, for which he received his second Obie Award for Best New Play. Please welcome André Gregory and Wallace Shawn.
Hello.
Hello. So, yes, is this us? Can anybody hear us? I hope so. Yeah.
Jessica?
She's gone.
Gone.
It's just us now.
YouTube.
I hear.
Well, thank you to all the people who left and hopefully have returned.
Yes. Oh, yes. Welcome back. Yeah. And
hello, Los Angeles.
Yeah, this is not actually my head. This is, I mean, you don't care. Who cares? But it's not really part of the show, but it's part of the technical problems. Anyway, I've been asked to interview André, which is in a way strange because I already know André, and
for 50 years.
I know quite a bit about him, so I don't want to just ask things that I already know. And he's already written his memoirs. But anyway, I will ask some questions about life and his life. Personally, I find it fascinating to be as old as I am, and I'm not as old as André, but your life it's not complete, and we could still do great things, or we could really screw up and do terrible things. A lot of people make big mistakes in their later years. which we could easily do. And we could also maybe do great things in our later years. But we have each had what some people would call a life, complete, really. And so we can look back on it in a certain way that you can't do when you're 25. And about, to ask, do you think about your childhood? Because I find I'm very surprised at how present it is.
Yeah, it never leaves you. In fact, uh, just doing this um, for Los Angeles, reminds me that some of my loveliest moments as a child were spent in Los Angeles, and they're still very vivid to me.
And the people, are there people who, the people don't, certain people fade, disappear completely, but certain people are still there exactly as vividly as they were 50 years ago.
Well, yes, I remember Harvey Snodgrass, who taught me how to play tennis, and I remember Aegon Nertz, who taught me how to ride a horse. And we go riding in little groups and one of the little girls was somebody called Elizabeth Taylor, who was learning how to ride so she could make her first movie, National Velvet. So certain people do stand out. But I think more than people, certainly in Los Angeles, what I remember most was the beauty of Los Angeles that looked more the way I guess Montecito does now.
Amazing. Now, we both had very, we were raised as members of a New York elite, really. We had similar, in a way, childhoods in that we both went to private schools. And speaking for myself, I had very little contact with anybody outside of a rather small section because some people in LA are transplanted New Yorkers. I'll mention the little section that I was in between 96th Street and 72nd Street and Fifth Avenue and Park Avenue. That was the little island that I lived on, and I went to private schools. Now, I feel it's never, that too has never left me. I've never escaped from it. Do you have any feelings about that?
Well, only to say that I absolutely loathed the private school that I went to. It was quite anti Semitic, and we were Jews. I was treated very badly at school. It's the story of that is in the book. But I just thought I would never ever get out of childhood, that which I didn't like. And I thought I was a prisoner forever, and I couldn't ever imagine growing up and being like these other people. But my life at school in New York and my life in my family in New York was a little grim.
And did you feel with those, it was boys, all boys at
All
these,
boys, yeah.
and did you feel different from the other boys? Did you have a sense, I want to get out of this world, or I feel different, or did you just accept it as it was and figure that life is going to be awful?
Well, you know, the only three Jews in school were my brother Alex, myself, and a guy whose father had contributed to the political career of Mussolini. So he wasn't exactly a kosher Jew. So I did feel uh, anti-Semitism. And it was very complicated because my family had changed their name from Josephowitz to Gregory in order to assimilate. And the story while that went around school was that Alex and I were the children of Russian aristocrats. So as a psychiatrist that I wanted to work with years and years later, I said, "Can I work with you?" And he said, "Oh, I would never work with you." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're a closet Jew. You're in the closet, and until you come out, you're so hidden I couldn't work with you." And that began back then.
But your parents, did they didn't even tell you that you were Jewish?
No, they didn't. No. In fact, I think I was probably hiding it even when I was at Harvard. And I remember having lunch with a friend in a New York restaurant, and she had been at Radcliffe. A woman came in and she said, "Andre, is it true that you're Jewish? I hear you were Jewish." And I can remember literally blushing. It was an awful feeling. Although, as you know, I worked with rabbis later on. I learned Hebrew, so um, I came out of the closet.
And your parents, let's say, they were not encouraging to you in many ways. They were not encouraging about your how old do you think you were when you first had the idea that you would like to work in some theatrical or artistic way in your
I was
life?
I was 12. I was in the school play and I was playing Petruchio in The Taming of the Shrew. Although, you know, while I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but it's quite paradoxical that This Is Not My Memoir has come out when I was 86 years old. And the response to it has been quite wonderful. And originally, I didn't want to go into the theater. Originally, I wanted to be a writer. I used to
Yes,
write stories for the school magazine. And so it's as if it's taken me 80 whole years to get back to writing.
absolutely. Well, it's
But I
not easy.
forgot, what was your
The
question?
the question is, yeah, what you started at 12 to feel artistic longings. You wanted to write or to be in the theater, and your parents were not very encouraging about that, as I understand it.
To
Did you
say the
even,
least.
did you even, I mean, do you think you benefited in any way from their lack of encouragement or enthusiasm about that?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that contributed to my being um, a young rebel when I first went into the theater. There was a critic who said I was a loose cannon because I was rebelling against them. And ironically enough, I sort of saw the audience back then in my theater as all my parents. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And yeah, were there any people in your, let's say, before you graduated from college who you spoke with or who encouraged you? Did you have any high school teachers who said, "Andre, you have talent. You should write. You should be an actor. You should go into theater."
Yeah, the only person, and I'll never forget her for it, who encouraged me was my father had a communist sister, and she was sort of highly suspect, Wall, because every time somebody like the Rosenbergs would get arrested, she would go to Australia, which, of course, in those days was a mammoth. She would disappear.
Yeah.
for a year or two. And her sister, I'm sorry, her daughter was a journalist for TASS, the Soviet newspaper at the United Nations. And this aunt of mine, who was a true Marxist, would say, go into the theater. Don't listen to them. Do theater for the workers. Change the world. So she was very, yeah, she was great.
Incredible. So you have told the story in the book, certainly, and that between graduating from college and bringing uh, Alice in Wonderland, your production of Alice in Wonderland, into the New York theater, you were about 35. So there were about 15 years in there when it sounds like you were not getting much more encouragement from the world or from people in theater than you got from your parents.
No,
Why did you keep going, or what sustained you? Or did you ever feel that you might quit and perhaps your father felt you might have had talent for law? Did you ever think, I'm going to,
yeah,
go to law school?
yeah. In fact, when my father was younger than I am now, which is very bizarre to think of, when he was 84, um, we'd had one of our many awful fights. And my late wife, Chiquita, went up to see him because she was sort of worried about how upset he would be. And he said, I don't understand why André gets so upset with me. What's his problem? What's his problem? She said, well, I think sometimes he thinks you don't respect him. And he said, don't respect him? Of course I respect him. He could have been a great lawyer, which is
Absolutely.
exactly the same thing that Woody Allen's father says to him at the end of that wonderful um, documentary about his musical group. He says, he could have been a great dentist, I think it was.
But why did you, what sustained you? What kept you going during those years, say between 20 and 35? What did you say to yourself during those years when so many people seem not to respect you and not really believe in you? Why do you think you kept on believing in yourself, or what did you say to yourself? Why do you
Yeah,
think you kept going?
that's a great question. Wow, because I remember my dream was to go to the Yale Drama School, and I was interviewed by this legendary dean. And at the end of the interview, he said, interviews with young people are very hard. They have no lines in their face. They're a tabula rasa. But occasionally, I do meet somebody who so clearly has absolutely no talent whatsoever. Don't do it, he said. The theater is hard enough if you have talent. Become a lawyer or become a doctor, um, which was a terrible blow to me. And as you know, these blows kept reoccurring through my life and career. I guess, I guess one thing, but this doesn't really answer your question, is people talk so much about talent. Um, but there are a lot of people with talent who don't stay in there, who don't persevere, who don't keep on going. They give up, you know. Uh, Moss Hart, the great Moss Hart, who I think directed his last musical when he was 102. So there's still hope for me. He said, in the theater, when you start out, there's one large pie, and everybody wants a piece of that pie. But then over time, other people drop out, they give up, they commit suicide, they go to the Balkans and direct in some little opera house. And then suddenly you're in your 60s or 70s and the whole pie is yours if you just hang in there and wait. But it's a question that in a way I can't really answer because I've asked it so many times. I mean, there is the thing of a calling or a vocation, something that pulls you along and you follow your vocation and you can't leave it. But you're the same. What has kept you going?
Well,
You haven't had it easy.
what comes to mind, I had a very, yeah, the first, I had many years where no one in the theater saw any value in the plays that I wrote until you, if I may say that, you were the first in the professional theater to find my plays interesting. And not too long after we met, I had sent my plays to the person who I admired so enormously in theater, Peter Brook. And I
Oh, I
knew,
didn't know that.
yes, you do.
Oh,
Uh, I I knew that you deeply admired Peter Brook. So I got a letter from Peter Brook that was very shattering to me, in which he said that in order to say anything at all about some work, you have to have at least a little sympathy for it, some inkling of sympathy, but he remained on the outside, he said.
mm-hmm.
And it was very, very painful to me. And it did make me think, you know, as I admired him so much, that perhaps I was going in, the wrong path in going into theater. And I was very afraid to tell you about it because I knew you admired Peter Brook, and I was afraid that you might be convinced that he was right and that you'd made a mistake in, forming a connection with me. But you were incredibly unstirred by his letter. I mean, you didn't, you, you were very sympathetic to me and just thought Peter Brook was wrong, and you didn't seem to lose confidence in me. So I had good luck that way. I mean, I was raised to think of myself as a great guy and very artistic. I mean, I was encouraged in school and at home in a way that you were not. So it's not surprising that I stuck with it when people didn't like me. And now many of the people who hated me are dead, and or they've retired, or they don't care, or they're not, involved in theater, or you know, and also at a certain point, people realize this guy is not leaving, so there's no point in trying to sort of force him to leave. He's not leaving. And so the answer, didn't ever reach a crossroads where you said, okay, I think maybe I will go into something else?
Actually, I did. When my company, the Manhattan Project that did Alice, fell apart, and it wasn't as if I gave up directing. It was as if directing had given up me. I did consider becoming a Jungian analyst, but I was turned down by the Jung Society. So they were always turning me down. I don't know why that is.
I think they wanted to see your next plays. That was why.
Oh, maybe.
Um, so now both of us have had the privilege of spending our lives basically having fun. I mean, you may not accept this description,
I think
but
I already do. Yeah.
I I know that I have spent my life doing things, a lot of them with you, that are the things that I would most enjoy to do. Playing. We you could say we both
Hmm.
have spent our lives playing. Now
Absolutely.
now I don't know if you've ever visited this restaurant that is in the neighborhood that you and I both live in New York. It's a lovely place called Chanson, and it had the idea of it's on 23rd Street across from Italy, and it had the idea of having uh, a dinner only of desserts, five desserts, 5 course meal, all of desserts. In some way, our life has been a little bit like that. Uh, what would you, or has it? I mean, what would you say if somebody who was not friendly said to you or me, well, you've lived as a parasite. You've, what, you've just done things that you found fun. What have you contributed to the world or to society? You're just like someone who's just had fun, eating desserts all day long.
Well, that is true. Um, but, and I often ask myself the question, what in God's name does this do for anyone? But recently, when I had a show of paintings in Tribeca, a young man bought a painting of mine because he'd seen my dinner with Andre and he'd been so moved by the film. And his little boy had just died, and he wanted some kind of remembrance of something good to help him try to forget his little boy. And I remember when we did the film of Vanya, it's a woman who wrote a letter saying, your film of Vanya helped me to die. Now, I don't know what in God's name that meant, but that was a gift. If one, uh, and Howard Zinn, who you know very well, or did, uh, when Cindy and I, when Bush had been elected for the second time, and we were appalled by Americans voting him in again, we went to Howard, who, of course, had marched with Martin Luther King. He didn't like being called a liberal. He said, I'm a radical. I'm a radical. And we said, what do we do, Howard? And he said, well, of course, the usual things, you can call your congressperson, you can write letters, very important to march in the streets. But he said, most of all, make your work, keep doing art, because art brings light in the darkness. Now, I don't know if I can say I believe that. I would like to believe it. Um, but it's true. I've had a hell of a good time, and it's never seemed like work. It's always seemed like play. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've become uh, more more sympathetic to artistic things as having some political value, as the the stupidity and incompetence uh, of political figures has become more evident. I feel that to do something well in an artistic field, I think it stretches people's intelligence. I mean, I think if people see something that has been made intelligently, they become more intelligent. I really do believe that.
I do too. Yeah, no, I
And
do.
and I think that you can't help. noticing that uh, someone like Trump is uh, is someone who I'm going to, not only has he never seen any of our work, I'm guessing that his knowledge of art in general, painting and music, is very lame indeed. He is the only president, I think, who didn't invite any classical musicians to play at the White House, even
Mhm.
hypocritically. Uh, I feel that his very flattened view of life, uh, you know, money, power, supremacy, success, uh, this is partly a result of a lack of exposure to artistic work and to the great people who created it. Now, you and I might not be great. We won't, that we don't know. I mean, we might be great or not. We can't judge that, obviously. But some artists really are, and we hope that we could be among that number. And I think it's to bring that into the world is quite important. And if Trump had, really devoted himself to the study of Mozart, I believe it would have been he would have been better for it. Even though I have read a million times the argument that many of the Nazis uh, could play music and were familiar with music, etc. But I don't believe that they fully plumbed the depths of the music that they could hear and play. That was possibly too long an answer, but that
No,
I
it was
think
interesting.
I mean I think
I was thinking, that um, the horrific Hitler at least liked to go see the movie It Happened One Night with Claudette Colbert and Clark Gable, and he went to see it over and over and over again, and he talked about it. I've never heard Trump talk about any work of art ever.
yeah, yeah. It's now I remember the two of us went to see a wealthy man. We were looking to raise some money, and uh, because to do all this playing, we did require money, and we did try to raise money on many occasions. And the guy became infuriated and basically kicked us out of his office almost because we revealed that we wanted to do a play that we would work on for a very, very long time, and that we only would do it for 25 people a night. Now, why what was the how would you if I mean we didn't get a chance to really justify that to the guy because he was so infuriated. But
You remember his last words to us?
I don't.
He said, "Get the hell out of my office. Who do you think you are, Marie Antoinette?"
So he was speaking along the same lines when he called us Marie Antoinette, uh, basically saying we were
Dilettante.
not dilettantes, not benefiting the world. So what? I mean, the audience may not realize that. I mean, some of the things that you have done as a director have been filmed and have been seen by an enormous number of people. But some have been seen by, you know, 25 people a night for, you know, a certain number of a limited number of performances. Why do you think that can be justified as something that could possibly benefit the world?
You mean doing it for a small audience?
Yes, yes.
Well, when I was on my first honeymoon and staying at a guest house in Jamaica, there was a Frenchman who showed us a little pink ivory elephant about the size of a thumbnail. And inside that elephant, he started taking out little instruments and pulling out tinier elephants and tinier elephants. And he had a magnifying glass to look at the minuscule evidence. And he said that it was one Indian man, one gentleman in India who had spent his life doing that as a gift to God. And I know that there are, I think it's Romanesque cathedrals in France where they accidentally, the people doing repairs on the cathedral accidentally with their X-ray equipment or whatever it was, discovered that there were these ravishingly beautiful sculptures behind the column where no one would ever see them. And they were made for God as a gift.
Yeah.
And I have to say that occasionally, I can remember once at Alice in Wonderland, these just stick out as examples. Once at your play, Grasses of a Thousand Colors, I saw, in both cases, a woman. I saw them illuminated, literally turned on by what they were seeing. And I thought, well, that's the audience, not the 45 or 160 or 860 other people. That one person is your real audience. And, you know, if you can reach them in an audience of 25 or 800, I don't think it matters.
But I think personally, I think I would rather uh, have a powerful effect on 25 than a feeble effect on 800. And I
Yeah.
think, I think to be in a small room with a group of actors gives you a better shot at the powerful, intense experience, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you don't have to act, you don't have to perform, you don't have to belt it out there. You can just be
Yeah.
with all the simplicity and the power of being. Yeah.
So now, speaking of, as I said at the beginning, that life, we have a kind of view of life now that we couldn't have had when we were younger, and you even more than me. Do you have, and you don't have to answer this, or you may have no answer, is there anything or things that particularly surprised you I mean, if you look at, let's say, compare your life to taking a trip to, some place that you had not been, to Borneo, and someone asked you, well, what surprised you there? Oh, well, I didn't know that there would be elephants there. Could you say anything about life that you didn't know when you were 25 that surprised you or shocked you?
You mean in my life in general?
Not one thing, but now that you are in your late 80s, is there anything about the experience of life that you wouldn't have known when you were
Well,
25?
I wouldn't have known that I was going to get old. And I wouldn't have known, there was that lovely picture of you and me in my dinner with André just before this began. And I looked at that young André and I thought, my God, who the hell is he? When you're young, I don't think mortality really gets to you. You just can't know it. It would be unnatural. Um, so I couldn't have envisioned getting old.
Yes.
And I certainly could not have envisioned having had this amazing life as an artist, which brought me, I think the relationships that you form in the theater can be like no other relationships. The gentleness, the kindness, the depth of your experience with others. Um, for the most part, I'd say many of my closest friends are people that I've worked with in the theater. So I could never have imagined when I was young the adventure of that.
I mean, I I had a wonderful arithmetic teacher when I was in school who said, "Well, when you get older, you'll realize that books are more important than friends." You've just mentioned friends. You don't have to, it's not necessary to compare books and friends, but knowing you, knowing you as one of the most voracious readers that I've ever encountered, uh, yes, I think probably have books also been important in that lifetime?
Oh, books have been incredibly important. But also, I think now that we're in lockdown, at least speaking for myself, friends have taken on an importance that maybe they never ever had to the same degree. And people that I thought were friends, that I'd like to go out to restaurants with and so on, have turned out not to be the people most precious to me. But God, yes, books have played an amazing part in my life. I have
And
to say, though, during COVID, I found it almost well during the two uh, the two viruses, COVID and Trump, have been so distracting. I found it very hard to read for the first time in years.
yeah, a lot of people have felt that. Um, do you think, I mean, now that we have uh, 50 million, well, let's say 70 million people voted for Trump, certainly, if you believe the polls, 50 million of them to this day believe the election was rigged. And I assume that means they're not going to trust future elections. What what can we do about it? Do you have any? What can we do about those people? I mean, you know, they seem to be. Trump brought a certain kind of people out of the silence, or it could be that maybe it's just me that I was unaware of the depth of the bitterness, and the New York Times in the old days didn't cover it. I guess they're trying now to cover it. And of course, in Europe, so many countries are heading to right wing regimes, anti immigrant, in Hungary, anti gay. What do you think? What can we do? Do you have any? What do you feel
God,
about all this?
I don't know. I feel helpless in the midst of history. And I think something that is so clear is we are in the middle of history. We always are, of course, but it's more apparent now. And I don't know that anybody has really explained why Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and Franco came to power, all within something like 5 years of each other. Um, there are many explanations, but none of them necessarily fit. And also, I think we've avoided, perhaps as Americans, the reality that the Civil War never ended, that the Civil War and racism and the country being divided in two never ended. They kept on through the Vietnam War, through the Iraq War, and I wonder if maybe if maybe Lincoln was wrong. Perhaps he shouldn't have gone to war to save the Union. Perhaps he should have allowed two countries, the North and the South, to exist separately.
Well, that doesn't always work. I
No.
mean, India and Pakistan were separated, and that doesn't, it's not something that's enviable, really.
Yeah,
Uh,
no.
it's, but I think Trump's fans, in many cases, have suffered genuine economic distresses that are caused by the globalism and later developments of capitalism. And maybe there's
That's true,
some.
but there are a lot of capitalists who love Trump because he seemed good for the stock market.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, some of his fans are just wealthy people who like money and
yes,
who
hello,
like.
Greenwich, Connecticut. Yeah,
Absolutely. No, many of his fans are, people who benefit. The interesting and strange part is those who don't, who still love him. Does now you, as you said, that you couldn't have anticipated uh, how you would feel about mortality. Do you think about death, and does that influence your feeling about the planet and global warming and the political situation?
well, as you probably remember, Prospero's last line in The Tempest, when he's going to go back to Milan, he says, "I'll back to Milan, and my every third thought shall be my grave." So I think my every third thought does tend to be about that. Uh, but I feel literally grief for the young people who are going to live after me because the planet looks so terrifying.
Yeah.
So I could say perhaps, well, I'm glad I won't be here to see it, but I wish I could do more to make it a healthy planet for young people.
Yes, I think if it were made into a healthy planet, there is a way of making it healthy that I mean, the Green New Deal or what something similar is that could help the people who are miserable, who love Trump, and who are losing jobs in the old economy. Well, now maybe we should take some questions if anybody has any from the audience.
Oh, okay. And I'll do something which I could never do if we weren't on these machines. I'll excuse myself and quickly go to the bathroom. I'll
Yes,
be right.
while you're doing that, I'm going to try to find these questions.
Okay.
Oh, it was very easy. And yeah, wow. There some of these questions are this one from Jess B is directed to both of us. Gentlemen, do you find you're still trying to attain or create things that your childhood imaginations sparked? Well, speaking for myself, I think so. I mean, when I was 5, I was in the Christmas pageant at our school. I don't know how many believing Christians there were in that school or among the teachers, among the the drama department of the school. I don't know, but the lighting. I played a shepherd, and the I'm explaining that I'm answering one of these questions. whether we're still trying to attain or create things that our childhood imaginations sparked. And I'm saying that when I was in the Christmas pageant, when I was 5 years old at school, playing a shepherd, the magic of the lights, the costumes, the make believe, the hugeness of the stage, I think that is still inspiring me. I am trying to get back to that. And I think the play that Andre directed, and that if anyone is interested, we've made a podcast of two of our plays that will soon be released. The Designated Mourner and Grasses of a Thousand Colors. I think Grasses of a Thousand Colors is very much trying to get back to that 5 year old experience that I had. I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is very important. Are you still trying to attain or create things that your childhood imagination sparked?
Well, yes, I do it in painting. I find that unlike my work in the theater, that when I'm painting, I return to a kind of childlike naivete and a more innocent Andre, perhaps, who was the Andre before the schools, the parents, the society got hold of him. Um,
Yeah.
so, yes, I have definitely returned to a kind of second childhood.
Now, here is a tough one from Andrew McCallum. The Andre character spoke about societal brainwashing in the film. What advice do you have for living authentically under late stage capitalism?
Ooh, that's a big one. That's a very big one. Um, well, in a peculiar way, this is just me personally. I've found that actually having to be in lockdown uh, because I have a pretty nice place to be, and I have a wife, Cindy, that I adore. Um, I haven't found being in lockdown particularly difficult, but I do think that one of the things that lockdown is doing is what many spiritual disciplines try to do, to destroy your habits. It's very, very hard. And my dinner with Andre, we talk a lot about that. It's very hard to get away from the habitual. And I think a lot of the things I used to do before, going out to restaurants, going to the theater, were habits just to cushion, say, the pain or the fear of getting older, or other fears. So perhaps trying to get rid of habits in order to maintain a clarity of vision. Uh, you know, One of the things, while I so admire about your plays, is you seem to be a prophet because you keep seeing what is actually coming about 10 years down the line. You know, the designated mourner, in a way, was predicting the approach of fascism in America. Grasses of a Thousand Colors was predicting, a plague, you could say. But I don't think it's that you're a prophet. I think you just have the ability to look at reality now around you and to see it with clarity. So that could be a first step towards changing oneself somehow. But how to deal with corporate fascism, I just don't know. What do you think?
Boy, it's. I mean, he's asking how do we live authentically. It's very difficult because the class system is uh, is so wrong, and the fact that people are arbitrarily divided into those who are going to be privileged and those who are going to have an incredibly difficult time uh, is so wrong that I don't know if it's possible to be an authentic person except to, I don't know, be sort of, if you're privileged, how can you be authentic? I mean, you can there's a contradiction and a hypocrisy built into it. I suppose you can try to see outside the boundaries of your own privilege, but it's tough,
Well, I
really.
suppose this isn't an answer on how to deal with it, but the only difference of opinion that Hitler and Mussolini had was Hitler liked to call their form of government fascism, and Mussolini liked to call it corporate totalitarianism. So we are probably living under corporate totalitarianism, I think. What you do about it, I suppose there are lessons in Eastern Europe under communism, Russia under the Soviets. If you read the amazing book, Hope Against Hope, by Mandelstam's widow, it says quite a bit about what it is to live under a totalitarian regime and the little bit sometimes of room you have to maintain your authenticity.
This is a great book, Nadezhda Mandelstam, Hope Against Hope.
Oh, it's a great, great book. Yep.
Incredible. Now, someone else here asks, eventually you did find a therapist after the the one who criticized you for not accepting your own Judaism, or not Judaism, but Jewishness. Uh, did you have a good experience with psychotherapy?
Well, I had, I guess, half and half. You know, I could count on one hand or two at the most the great directors whose work I've seen in the 20th century. They're very rare. Um, Great shrinks are very rare. And as in a relationship, not only do they have to be terrific, they have to be a good match for you. So I would say I've maybe known two or three, and I was lucky that way. And I knew a couple of horrible ones that I worked with.
But what harm could a horrible one do?
Oh, as much harm as a horrible director could do. The actor, as you know, is very, very vulnerable and very raw and very revealing in the process of the rehearsal. So is an analysand. Um, I know a guy who worked for 35 years with the same mediocre analyst. you know, um, so you're like a little child. I remember my daughter when she was in school, she was drawing, and the teacher came up. She was drawing a horse, and the teacher took her eraser and said, "You can't draw a horse like that. A horse doesn't look like that." So if you're brave, and sometimes it takes a certain courage to reveal something about yourself that you've never revealed before, and the analyst doesn't know how to deal with it, you know, terrible,
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
They're like critics sometimes. You remember John Simon, uh, the critic for New York Magazine? He started one review of, I think, maybe one of our works, certainly one of mine. He said every time he began his review, every time Mr. Gregory does a new work, I feel like going into the alley and vomiting into a trash can. And I met him in the street once, and he was really quite nice to me. He was a polite Hungarian. And he said, "What are you up to?" And, I said, "This and that." And I said, "Oh, and Wally and I are doing a new play." And he said, "Can't you people ever stop?" Well, uh, critics have never bothered me, but I think an analyst could get you very screwed up.
Yeah, yeah. Now here is another one. Um, this is an
These are all
interesting.
great questions.
Yes.
What
Well,
good
this
questions.
is a very smart audience, clearly. How has the role of patronage, funding, and support changed over your lifetimes? Is independence more or less viable now? Independence, I assume, having to do with the fact that trying to do plays or films uh, not for an institution that already exists. How has funding and patronage and support changed over our lifetimes?
Oh, I don't know about you all. I think it's changed terribly and for the worse because people who grew up wealthy, like the Rockefellers, the Mellons, people like that, they grew up being taught that their responsibility to society was to fund the arts and to fund, things that deserve to be funded. And in fact, of course, if you put $10,000 or $20,000 into a nonprofit play, you get a tax deduction. So if you've got a lot of money, that's no problem. But today, um, I think we're seeing a generation or two who has not been brought up with the idea of giving. So it's much, much harder.
Yes, I mean, it's hard to believe this, but tell about the National Endowment for the Arts and your company in the early days. I mean, that was an amazing story. And then say what happened to the National Endowment for the
Oh,
Arts.
yeah. Well, in the earlier days, the 70s and so on, uh, most of my actors who really didn't make a great living, but because of the foundations, they could make, an okay living. And because of the price of real estate, a couple of the actors lived in quite lovely apartments in the East Village. Um, where that, oh, and I remember my friend Grotowski. I took him to the Rockefeller Foundation, I think in the late 70s, because he needed a lot of money for a very big project. And he started to describe his project to the head of the Rockefeller Foundation. And the guy said, "Whoa, hold on, Yerzy. Your job is not to explain your project to me. And when you finish your project, it's going to be very different anyway from what you're describing right now. Your job is to tell me how much money you want, and my job is to give you as much of it as I can." Huh. That seems like the Middle Ages now. It's impossible. I
Yeah.
remember, I remember I went to the head of the National Endowment or the Ford Foundation, one of the two, because I wanted to get a little money so that Louis Malle could tape our rehearsals. probably so he could figure out his angles ahead of time, and also partly to teach me how to act. And I went up to her place and I explained the project to her. And at the end, she said, I have not understood one goddamn word you've said. And on top of that, I have to tell you that I haven't liked any of your work since Alice in Wonderland. Now, somebody from the National Endowment would not have talked that way, or the Rockefeller Foundation, I think, in the earlier days.
No, I mean, there was, you know, at a certain point, I mean, when the National Endowment began, their goal was to give money to people who absolutely could never do their projects
Mm-hmm.
without government subsidy because they were doing something strange or unexpected or not expected to be commercially successful. And then at a certain point, there were more shocking things done, and people decided that they didn't want to give money in that way. Um, now,
I was just going to throw in that uh, if you out there read my book, and I hope you will, there's a pretty interesting story of how I went to Germany to meet an Indian guru to pray for the money we needed to do Vanya.
uh, now I think we're coming up possibly on the time that people may have to return to their previous life um, before our conversation. Well, I'll read this one question because it's sort of easy, but maybe not for you. I don't know. Hello, says Hayden Duchka. I have a question for both of you. What is your favorite Ingmar Bergman film, and what about Bergman moves you the most?
Well, you go first, Walt.
Oh, I think, yeah, I I I love uh, Persona.
That's the one I was going to say. I was going to say Persona. Yeah.
You know, it's hard to uh, you can't beat that. Uh,
Oh, that's
although,
interesting. We've never talked about it. We have the same best Bergman. Yeah.
I mean, it's just its aesthetic beauty is absolutely incredible, and it's the acting is incredible, uh, and the how can I put it, the using the word of one of our other questioners, there's something so authentic about the
Mm-hmm.
dilemma of Liv Ullmann's character. Something that's very deep. But I have to say, I love the one that's mentioned in My Dinner with Andre, Autumn Sonata.
That's what I was going to say, too. I think Autumn Sonata is one of the greatest studies of narcissism that I've ever seen. And Ingrid Bergman is astounding. Both of them are astounding. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, again, Liv Ullmann, it's amazing. Uh,
I was also going to say that obviously the person who asked us the question loves Bergman. And I think an even more extraordinary film director is Tarkovsky. And his last film, The Sacrifice, is very Bergman like. If you love Bergman, you might love that film if you don't know his films.
well, uh, golly, there are
Hey, Joanne.
many wonderful questions, but you know, uh, they're great. But yeah, I think we should turn this over to Jesse and we could answer these questions for a year. There are so many great questions.
Yeah, the
Well, I
questions were amazing.
There
Oh,
were
I
good
can't hear you.
questions, don't you think?
Great question.
Wonderful,
And
wonderful
Jesse,
questions.
before I lose you forever, I have to tell you that your father's poem, Dark Harbor, is one of my favorite poems ever. And I've read it 3 or 4 times. Beautiful.
Thank you. I mean, I shouldn't be thanking you for him, but since I'm the one standing still, I'll thank you for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're all fans,
I know Wally
greatest
for many,
fans.
many years. So it's so wonderful to see you and him. Thank you both for such a wonderful conversation. It could have gone on and on. It was so lovely. I'm really grateful for you both being here tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are in the country. So thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you, Andre. And
Oh, and
Wally,
you.
so good to see you.
So great to see you.
And
Um,
I can't tell you, Wally, how great it is to be talking again. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Me too. It's,
oh, but I want
yeah.
to tell everybody that they can, that on the link to the confirmation for this ticket and on the chat link, they'll be able to find a link from Criterion so that they can go directly to my dinner with Andre, and that link will be live till Tuesday, for time, 4 o'clock on Pacific Standard Time and 7 on the East Coast.
Is that
And
a movie?
is it? I think so.
Is that a movie?
I have a feeling it is. I think you worked on it. Maybe the two of you. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe. Anyway, thank you both for being here this afternoon, this evening. It was wonderful. We could listen for hours, and I want to wish you all a happy holiday season. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. And
Stay
please,
safe, everyone.
all of you,
Yeah.
everyone, stay safe. And if you like this program, come and join the Library Foundation for more at lfla.support.org. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
And this is strength.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
take care. Bye.